I think we're ready to go. I think we're both in frame. I'm just going to snuggle in real close here. Get real cozy. Hi everyone, welcome to Deadhouse. I'm here with Jennifer and today we're doing...
Stay out of the basement.
Stay out of the basement.
This was a good read.
This was a good read. This was a way better read than I expected. The first book was decent, but this one was actually really well done. Like, really got caught up in the story.
Yeah.
Before we get into too many of the details, I'm going to give you the rundown on this book. Again, published by Scholastic. I don't think I need to go over too many of those details. It was first printed in July 1992, which is the same as the last one.
That was a good year.
I'm assuming that was a good month. I'm assuming that, you know, a lot of this would have been pre-written and ready to come out, because where they were serialized children's books, they probably like pumped out 5 or 10 at a time for printing schedule to have time so that there was always more coming. Stay Out of the Basement follows Casey, who is a little 11-year-old boy, and his older sister, not by much, 12, Margaret. Yeah. And the story is told from her point of view. It's about a dad who, it's sort of a familiar tale, where, you know, you have a parent who's attentive when you're little, gets busy with work, and as you start to get older, you start to get that distance between the busy parent and the kids and schoolwork. And he gets let go from his research position because he wants to take his research in a whole other direction, and the company he works for doesn't want to dabble too far into the experimental realm.
I think the experiments were a little bit beyond what the capacity was for the Polytech. I think he was kind of taking a step outside of what they were expecting.
Yeah, very experimental research.
Very.
Stuff that was pushing boundaries in a way that the company was not comfortable with.
Yeah.
So he got let go, but decided he was onto something that would be the next, like, big revolutionary human breakthrough. Yeah. That this would really change humanity for the better. So he took to his basement, where he became almost obsessive and even more distant from his children working on his experiments.
And it did change humanity, but whether it changed it for the better, I'm not really sure about that.
No. So to give you a bit more background on him, he's a botanist. His name is Dr. Brewer.
Yep.
Yes? Yes. His name is Dr. Brewer. He is toiling away at these experiments because the idea was he wanted to be able to replicate human organs. So the idea was that you would have them available for transplant, but they would be plant-based so you could grow them.
Yeah. More, I guess, efficient way of getting them instead of waiting for the unfortunate to happen or for black market harvesting. He wanted to grow them to have a supply ready for those who may need them based on whatever would come up.
But his experiments take a turn. When we first start this story, we don't know exactly what his experiments are.
No.
And we don't expect it to be this because he works with plants.
Yeah.
And you think, what could he possibly be getting up to with plants? It can't be that terrible, right? Right?
Right. In theory.
So this story was super good at building tension, where the last one had a lot of false starts.
Yeah.
And it would give you sort of a point of extreme tension and then almost resolve it right away in a way that it was not anything super pertinent to the story, much the way like a jump scare does.
Yeah.
And so the last book didn't build tension because it was constantly relieving tension. So then when the action happened all really fast at the end, it was like you'd had a bunch of mini moments rather than one full big epic thing. Whereas this builds tension slowly the entire time. As you wonder more and more, what is he doing in that basement? What is going on down there? And how big is their, much like the graveyard in the last one, how big is their basement anyway?
And their power bill. Like, they said it was a very humid, warm environment because of the plants that he was building. Like, adult me was just thinking, the power bill must be atrocious.
Well, it was so bad, even, like, they were saying it was like a jungle, and, like, the kids were having to, like, strip off layers of clothes as they went down the basement. It was so hot.
I know California is warm, because that's where the story takes place, but I don't think California basements are jungle warm.
Yeah, and I don't think California basements are that common.
No, maybe not.
So I think it's kind of rare to have a basement in that part of the States. I mean, you can correct us if we're wrong, but I don't think basements are super common. Like, there's certain areas in the U.S. because of earthquakes and because of the hard bedrock of the ground, there are not as many basements. And I think California is one of those areas where you're lucky to get a place with a basement in it. So I also can't imagine that basement would be ginormous.
No.
But this basement is freaking ginormous.
Yeah.
Like, in addition to basically having a jungle of full-blown trees, there's a couple of closets in the basement. There's one side of the basement that is his experiments and the trees, the giant trees, and all this plant life that they can walk through and almost get lost in. And then the other half of the basement is like an old ping pong table and a bunch of shelves with like all of their summer and like seasonal decorations and all that kind of stuff packed up. So they have one half of the basement that's storage. It's just like, how big? Do they live in a mansion?
They have to. And it's the only reason. And they looked long and hard for it because of Dr. Brewer's job. They had to. It's the only logic.
Yeah. He must have gotten, before he was fired,
Yeah.
he must have gotten paid well at this research company.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they had a huge backyard, too.
Yeah.
Like, a huge, beautiful backyard.
Yeah. Who knows?
And then, and I know this isn't the types of questions we should be asking, but how did they afford the electric bill?
Yeah.
And everything else for this house and the materials for his experiments while he doesn't have a job and the mother is also not working?
Yeah, so they must have a money tree in the basement.
Oh, well, that explains
It's one of the
it.
tropical trees.
That was one of his earlier developments. He made a money tree.
Yep.
So to get into more of the plot, the children are left alone with the dad because their mom's sister becomes ill and ends up in hospital. They never say exactly why.
No.
Or exactly what happened.
They don't really build that part of the story.
No. They just know that there's been, we're told there's a family emergency and she has to fly away to see her sister in Tucson. And she's staying with her in hospital. So she's gone. This whole book happens over the course of about 2.5 weeks.
Yep.
Because the mom is gone for 2 full weeks. And then partway through the next week, she comes home. So they're left alone with their dad, and that's not giving them a lot of time with him because he is in the basement.
The whole time, pretty much.
And he's constantly telling them, don't go in the basement.
Which, if you tell a kid, don't do something, they're gone doing it.
So they're sitting around one day with their school friend doing homework, and the younger brother's watching TV.
Yep.
And they get bored, and their friend, what was her name?
Diane?
Diane. Yeah, Diane Manning. What a name. She doesn't really want to do the homework.
No.
And she's awful curious about what their father's been doing. He's a little bit of like a note of gossip in the community.
Yeah, she was definitely the one who kind of pushed the button on getting the kids to go down.
Instigated, we'll say.
Yes.
Yeah. And she was like, come on, let's just see what's going on down there. And as much as she tried to protest, Margaret didn't want to, Margaret actually secretly really wanted to know what was going on in the basement.
Yeah.
And the minute Diane suggested it, their brother, like, turned his attention from the TV and was like, basement, and was like, down there before anybody could say anything.
Yeah. Now, when they get into the basement, when the brother, Casey, gets entangled with the plants.
Yeah.
And he said it wasn't like a struggle, it was more like a hug almost.
Yeah.
That was really intriguing.
This is the impression I got too.
Yeah.
Because when they go down the basement and they're confronted with all of these, like, huge trees,
yeah,
they don't notice anything off about the plants yet.
No. Other than the sound that they're making. It's
like it seems like a moaning. There's a lot of, like, sighing and swaying.
Yeah.
But trees are known for making sort of whisper noises.
Yeah.
And this is a thing with, like, tree mythology, I guess we'll say, for stories. It's like the trees whisper or talk to you. Like you can hear Mother Nature or...
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stories, too, about people turning into trees. It's a huge... mythological thing. It's got a lot of background.
Okay.
So it's not too weird to have them describe the noises trees make in kind of human terms, especially with this type of story. But even from the beginning, the way they say it almost looked like this one tree was like slowly lowering itself towards him before he got entangled. It almost felt like the way it was set up and the way it was slowly lowering itself. It really did feel like it was more so trying to embrace him than grab him and hurt him.
Yeah, so that got me curious because at that point, I didn't read this book as a child. This wasn't one that I read. So
This was
for you, yeah.
And I actually remembered this one on like Deadhouse, which I didn't really remember that well. I actually like started to remember bits of this one as I was reading.
So I was reading when I was looking at what was happening in the basement. The tree was lowering and the moaning and the sighing. That kind of brought my attention to the experience, the type of experience that the father could be working on, because that's very like the lowering down to the child level and the embrace is more like an affection. So you'd expect that from like a parent. You wouldn't expect that from a stranger. So maybe he was doing experiments that kind of linked him to trees a little bit. That's where I started to go with that.
Yeah, that is a really, like, that is your first foreshadowing.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
you do definitely get the impression from that entire encounter and the way they set it up, and then his reaction after the fact, that it was very much like a loving thing. And at that point, because I did remember bits and pieces as I was reading it, at that point, other than the fact that, spoils on the back, I couldn't 100% tell if this was their father yet or if it was their mother. Because the mother was gone. And the dad took her to the airport. And so then I didn't know if she was being used in the experiments. So it sort of made me like, and the way she was constantly away and she only talked to the kids once while she was gone, it really made me feel like they were, it kept me suspicious of, well, what really is happening with the mother? And is he experimenting on her as well? As himself?
Your mind just like goes into all those places.
Yeah, and then he calls up, he feels like he's been successful, so he calls up Polytech and his old boss to show him where this is led, and, then the boss goes missing. Yeah. And then later they find his clothes down the basement, because of course they're going to keep going down the basement.
Yeah, the first time wasn't scary enough, so, let's keep doing it.
But they had to know, especially since their father was being so distant. Yeah. They really were trying in their child way to connect to their father.
And the father, Dr. Burwer, his reaction and demeanor changed at some point throughout the novel too, where it was very noticeable, I found. Yeah. Because like the first time he caught the kids downstairs, he went off like a lit firecracker. And then the second time when he caught them, it was completely different.
Like he was trying not to arouse their suspicions.
Yeah.
Like the second time he caught them, he was upset.
Yeah. But not at the level he was at that first time. Like he had calmed down.
The first time he was in a panic. And he was like, listen, you cannot be around my experiments. They're dangerous. They're volatile. You don't. And like he put the fear of God in them.
And when that change in his attitude happened, that got me very suspicious about what he's doing. So why would he go off on the same situation at 2 different levels? Like, he went off at like a 10 and then he went off at like a 7. Like, it was a very noticeable anger drop. So that's when...
like, he wanted them to stay away from it, but he also didn't want to call too much attention to it. Like, he didn't want them... And this is what made me think, okay, maybe the mother is still in play. Because it was almost like he didn't want them to tell their mother what was going on.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I was reading it differently. I was reading it that the father had changed.
Well, yeah, he had, but to me, like, that was the change. Like, he had changed from, you know, stay out, this is dangerous, I don't want you to get hurt, to, listen, don't tell your mother.
Yeah.
Like it kind of had that feeling to it. Like, the second time they got down there, he was like, listen, this is still dangerous, but it seemed like he was trying to not draw attention to what he was doing. And, like, that was the change. Like, he didn't want to draw that extra...
Oh, okay, so I went with a different angle.
Okay.
I went as in he changed as in he was keeping up the demeanor that he was still Dr. Brewer, but he wasn't actually Dr. Brewer. And he didn't want the kids to find their father. So he thought he was reacting appropriately to the situation.
And that's a good read on it, too.
But intimidation isn't always exactly as the original act is. And I think that's what he was going for. He was going to intimidate, or not intimidate, but he was going to act just like the father would have acted in the situation.
Imitate.
Yes, imitate, sorry. And he missed the mark because they weren't around the same situation at the same time, because they both couldn't be in the situation at the same time.
And
so
that's a really good read on it, yeah.
That's the way that I took it. And I was just very curious then about what was going on and what are the kids very close to finding out.
So it's good you bring that up, because that is what's been going on with the father.
Mm-hmm.
I read it more like he didn't want them to tell their mother, but I read that in that I'd already kind of suspected he wasn't actually Dr. Brewer.
Oh, okay.
And so he didn't want more of the family to know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Especially not an adult who could put an end to what he was doing as plant Dr. Brewer.
Yeah, because that would have been like kaputted very fast.
But having the interpretation you did, in that he just didn't know how their father would behave, that's a really good take.
I've seen Parent Trap too many times. And that was like the first place my mind went.
Let's discuss how Dr. Brewer's been changing physically.
Yeah. First change was the addition to his hair, I think. It was the lovely sprouts of leaves that were growing, which he decided to cover up with a baseball hat.
Yeah, his hair was falling out.
Yeah.
And in its place, a sprout had grown.
Was it one or was it a couple?
It was like one sprout, but like with a bunch of like leaves coming out of it.
Okay.
Like a little mini tree on top of his head.
Yeah, and he just started wearing a baseball hat all the time all of a sudden.
Yeah,
which is very out of character.
Then, like, they get a glimpse of the leaves, and he's like, oh, I can explain, and I'll tell you all about it, I promise.
Yeah, let's sit down for that. I'm going to go grab my coffee, and you can explain to me why there's a tree growing out of your head.
And that's when the kids start to get a little more suspicious, and they're not really satisfied with his sort of half, not real, full explanation.
Like he wasn't fooling nobody.
So then, a few days later, because remember, this all happens in the space of just over 2 weeks. She wakes up in the middle of the night because she hears her dad. He's been tinkering down in his workshop, and she wakes up and he's still not back in bed. And she hears him in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And the bathroom door's left ajar. So she checks, and he's changing his bandage from a nick on his hand. And the first time she checks on it, it's normal. It's red blood. Later, when she checks on it, because she's concerned about this tree situation, it's green. Yeah,
like the inside of like an aloe plant, or like if you cut like a stem off of a plant, it was oozing
like thick green ooze.
Yeah.
And she was like, that's weird.
Yeah, concerning maybe.
Because she noticed when, like I said, when the cut first happened, it was red. But when she gets up in the middle of the night this one night and she sees him in the bathroom, it's green.
Yeah, that's nightmare-inducing.
But she's too afraid to talk to her father. And this is something that is done really, really well to build the tension. She wants to be close to her dad. She wants to talk to her dad. And Casey wants the same thing. And she's trying to explain to Casey the weird things she's seeing and what's happening without panicking him.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, she's trying to get answers from her dad, and she wants to trust her dad and believe in her dad. But he's behaving so oddly, and so many things aren't adding up.
Like he's not eating his meals, and she found him in the kitchen over the kitchen sink going absolutely mad over a non-food item for humans. So she went, and after the father left, being curious, had to look through the garbage and found out that it was plant soil.
Yeah, fertilizer. He's eating fertilizer.
Like, it is the only thing that he's ever eaten in years, and he's just like fist over fist on fertilizer. So,
well, years being an exaggeration. It's the first thing she's seen him eat in days.
Yeah, but like he was so like involved with the eating, like he just couldn't get enough.
She was there.
No. It was just so weird for her, and I think that was a setting off point. Like if the green blood didn't set her off, like the fertilizer certainly
did.
Yeah.
And it builds really well on this natural tension, because this is a really good solid concept. Is you take something simple and understandable, like I'm trying to relate to my parents as I'm getting older and as they're getting further into their jobs, and we don't relate the same way we used to when I was a young child.
Yeah.
And we don't know where this new ground is.
No.
And she's struggling to understand her father and also just get attention from her father. Like she keeps talking about memories often in this, about when they were younger and things he used to call her and stuff they used to do together.
Yeah.
And you can tell they're at an awkward age where he doesn't know how to relate to his children anymore, because some of those things you can't do the same because they're too old for it, but some of those things he could still be doing, but he's so caught up in his own work.
That's what I think it was. He was so caught up in his work that he didn't realize that maybe he let that slip as much as he did.
Exactly. And it's a common enough thing that happens to just about everybody. It's so relatable and such a simple concept, but the way they take that concept and push it to something sinister is done so well. And I say they, but I mean R.L. Stine.
We know who they are. It's the one person.
The scene in particular, I mean, talking about the fertilizer, like, their dad is truly becoming terrifying. Like, this is a really, really scary build. Like, to think of your parent as somebody you suddenly can't trust like that anymore, and you don't know what's happening. And they're somebody totally different. Now, in this case, he actually is.
And he's not a somebody, he's a something.
But, like, that scene where he tries to get them to eat the plant proteins, which I think would have made them part plant, was so horrifyingly chilling. And the way she was trying not to eat it and signal to her brother not to eat it, and the way they both just, like, dumped it in the garbage the minute he was gone and pretended they'd eaten it. And, of course, this plant guy, not thinking to check, took them at their word. They said, oh, we ate it. And he was like, oh, that's great. And was suddenly so happy. But the way he was pushing for it in a non-aggressive...
He really wanted them to
eat. It was in a not subtle way. I mean, it was aggressive, but it was like a passive-aggressive movement, the way he was trying to force that on them.
Well, he had never cooked any meals for them thus far with the mom being gone. This was the first meal that he actually put together and put down in front of his kids to eat. And it was the plant protein. So the kids were not only off guard because the father was cooking for them now all of a sudden, but because he was so adamant that they needed to eat this.
Yeah. And he said, oh, well, I realize I haven't been around and I've made this for you, so you need to eat it.
Yeah.
But it was very manipulative, and that whole scene was just so chilling. Like, that scene really got to you, you know, and especially to sit there like that across from a parent.
Yeah.
And wonder how you were going to get out of that kind of situation.
I've seen that situation play out in different horror movies as well. But that's a scene that horror movie producers actually go back to and include in certain family plots when the horror movie story revolves around a family.
Yeah. It has something to do with the idea of, like, the family as a unit, and those old ideas of hearth and sticking together, and, you know, you cooked by a fire and you told stories by a fire. And the idea of, well, even now in, like, Newfoundland tradition and in tradition almost everywhere, the kitchen is like the heart of the family, the heart of the home. And so to have that be the situation it's just such a good, strong, like, everybody feels that.
Yeah, it was a Supernatural, actually, episode. I think it was in season 12. That the mom actually poisoned the family around the table through a meal. So, like, taking that scene in this book with the context of this is something that has been used before and there's not usually a good result from it was a really chilling aspect. There was another plant soil situation as well with this, with the father's bed, when it looked like it was not slept in.
Right.
Yeah.
I forgot about that for a second.
It was really cool. I think it was Margaret that found the bed not slept in and something was moving under the covers. And it wasn't a person or a pet. It was actually earthworms and soil.
Yeah, he had his bed lined with it.
Yeah, it was like he was creating his own flower bed, something of nutrition that would rejuvenate him. Instead of, like, human would just take a nap or go to bed, he needed the nutrition from the soil to feel better.
Which was a really interesting take, and to make it in the bed, that was actually pretty cool.
Yeah. Now, an aspect that I found really, excuse me, interesting too is the mom knew what was going on.
Well, sort of, but not really.
She knew that there would be another Dr. Brewer. She had an idea, but she didn't.
I didn't get that. What made you think that?
When she seen the two of them there, she was like, "Oh no," and it just seemed like she knew that Dr. Brewer was up to what he was doing, and there was two of them, but she just didn't want the kids to find out. My interpretation of it was she knew what was going on. She left the kids knowing what was going on. She just didn't understand the dangers of it. And all of a sudden, here they are battling off plant father versus human father. And they had to figure out which one was which.
See, I don't think she knew.
Oh, okay.
And this is the thing that made me, like, I don't know, something about her reaction just seemed like she knew he was experimenting. And she knew she was taking a risk when she left that he may not be as attentive as he needed to be to the kids. But I don't think she suspected anything like what he was doing. And she seemed really upset after the thing was over and was very insistent about him clearing out the basement and making sure things were gone and done.
And I took that upset to be towards, it got as far as it did. Not that it was happening, but that the kids were seeing what was going on.
I don't think she expected his experiments to be anything like that at all. And that's why I took it that way. I took it as their dad being, like, all these things were saying as the plant dad. The second dad that came about, the plant clone. Which, by the way, their real father had the tree as well.
Oh, both of them did.
Yeah.
Because of the
experiments.
Yeah.
And the way the DNA splicing happened. And a lot of this happened by accident. He was keeping secrets and not talking about what he was really doing. And I think he had told the mother something totally different about what he was doing with his experiments in the basement.
Oh, okay.
And this is what made him such a creepy character, because while the plant clone was a metaphor for your parent changing and not being able to trust, and it's almost like they're another person, as you get older and you start to see, your parents are actually just people.
Yeah. They're people too.
Yeah, as you start to learn that, and this is very much a metaphor for that.
Okay.
But at the same time, that's what made Dr. Brewer so scary, because he actually was different than what they thought he was. He was keeping so many secrets. And the mother decided to trust him, even though she was adamant about, like, he had to get rid of this stuff now because it had gotten way too far out of control. He was still keeping a little bit extra.
Yeah.
And, like, he wasn't totally trustworthy. He was harboring all these things, and he really was a totally different person than they realized, that he was.
Yeah.
And that was part of what made his character so scary. Like, Dr. Brewer was scary anyway. Mm-hmm. When you think about the lengths he went through.
For his projects.
Yeah.
And
the fact that he got fired over it and then kept doing it.
And we should mention, too, that what was his doctor? Was it Mr. Martinez?
Yes, Dr. Martinez.
Yeah. He was actually put into the closet with the real Dr. Brewer as well.
Yes, because Plant Brewer was in charge.
Yes.
By the time Martinez came for a visit, Plant Brewer was the one who was confident, like, hey, I've made this thing work.
Yeah, and he didn't actually leave the house, so the kids were onto something when they found his clothes.
Yes.
And the plant did
They went down the basement to find a kite, because it was a beautiful day, and the storage is in the basement. They couldn't go in. So they went down for it, and they heard much more noises, and the plants were more active, and they got suspicious. Mm-hmm. And that's when they found their father and Dr. Martinez tied up.
In the closet, yeah. Sketch. But everything's good. Like, they did do a nice little wrap-up in the end. Like, R.L. Stine with the Goosebumps books, he tends to leave a cliffhanger. Like, the last paragraph is a cliffhanger, which I really, really like.
So after they have the big showdown, and she realizes her real dad is her real dad because of the way he called her princess.
Yeah.
Even though she hadn't heard that term for a long time, this is the other thing about that. Everything about her real dad, when he seemed manipulative. Mm. Even when it was him trying to prove it was him, and the way he used certain emotional words, like he hadn't called her that pet name in years.
But the plant would know.
Why would he do it all of a sudden? Right, but still, like it seemed, the way he talked to her too, it seemed very much like an emotional ploy at her, because he tried to get the axe and use the axe, and that was what made you think he was Plant Brewer instead of actual Dr. Brewer, because the way he talked to her about trying to get the axe was so emotionally manipulative. And and I realized he wanted a weapon to destroy the plant version, and it was actually him, but like you couldn't trust him.
Yeah, but I figured
he was such an untrustworthy character.
I figured he used the pet name from her childhood to identify with her, that I am your father. I know that I used to call you this. This is me, because the plant wouldn't have those memories. The plant wouldn't be able to do that.
He was still acting so sketchy in trying to get that axe from her that she didn't believe him.
No.
And she actually waited until they were both cut. To see, because red blood versus the green. And that was how she knew the difference. Yeah. Like, even in that moment, she couldn't trust that was her father.
It's a smart move, though, because...
I mean, it is, but what does that say about their relationship? That even then, she couldn't trust that would be her father.
Well, if the plant was trying to live and take over, it would have been manipulative as well. It would have acted in any way that it needed to act to survive.
Right, but I feel like her father shouldn't have needed to be manipulative. Yeah. That's my point here, is that they never had a good relationship, and she never trusted him, not fully anyway. And rightly so, because look what he was doing in the basement.
I took it as like a fair thing. Like, everybody was trying to contain the situation, and the situation was just completely out of hand.
Even with his burning everything and getting rid of everything in the basement, he promised to only keep things he hadn't used in the experiment that he knew were safe.
Yeah.
And what did he do? He saved one of the living, sentient, weird piece of him plants and put it in the backyard and planted it and kept it anyway.
Like, it's not a normal plant. It doesn't have the normal plant genetics. So obviously this is the recipe for chaos. Something's going to happen.
And he left it despite the fact that he knew it wasn't normal. It was one that it experimented on. I think that after being in the backyard for X amount of time, it had probably progressed more and become even more human-like because it was talking. Yeah. So it was one of his better creations, because the other ones were weird, sighing, moaning, lumbering ones. And the more often they went down the basement, the more they said it sounded like these plants were in pain. and they kind of, on some level, felt bad for the plants, even though they were creeped out by them.
But that one actually spoke to Margaret?
Yes.
Yeah.
And called out to her by name, so it recognized her, and said, "I'm your real dad."
Yeah, that's weird.
"Princess, please believe me." And it plays with that idea that maybe this plant out here is her real dad, and that's why it was saved. I don't think it was.
No, I think it was messing with her.
I think the dad is way too untrustworthy, and I think this was his best reproduction other than Plant Dad, the one that looked just like him. I think this was his next best creation.
And he wanted to save it.
And he put it in the backyard hoping no one would notice.
Until it starts speaking, because, all the flowers don't talk. Except for that one, so,
And I don't know if he knew it had progressed that far yet.
Yeah.
But something in him, whether or not he got found out, couldn't help it. And was still trying to keep more secrets.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big takeaway at the end there.
Yeah. It also leaves it open for a possible sequel if that's the way that R.L. Stine wanted to go with it. But there was no sequel to that one.
No, but it would have been a good one.
Yeah, he left the doors open just in case.
Yeah. And he always does.
Yeah.
With every incarnation of Dr. Brewer, because he was always making all these plants were different versions of himself, and where we end with that flower and it's like, maybe it's him.
Yeah.
Which neither of us bought.
No.
He at least showed affection, like genuine affection for his children. So what I think we want to know from you guys is, what do you think about that? Do you think maybe he couldn't kill the plant because it was so much like himself and so much more intelligent?
And it was the only one that was
he killed
speaking.
the clone.
Yeah.
Or is it just that he's obsessed? He's so obsessed with his work he can't stop. We want to know what your thoughts and theories are on it.
Yes, for sure. And you can settle our argument too about whether the mom was in on it or was just a surprise when she seen both of them too. Because I think we're
a surprise, yeah, and you think she's in on it.
I think she knew. So, you can support.
I think he kept everything a secret. I don't think she knew any of it.
Okay.
But if you, like Jen, was convinced that she at least knew some of what was going on in the basement, let us know for sure. And you can do that with Twitter, as well as the comments down below. And your Twitter is?
Well, I've got my blog account that I'm really on a lot. So if you want to contact me on that regarding any of these Goosebump videos, it's coffee_with_Jen with one N.
And you're also
at Miss MRS_J_Will.
And you can get me at a glitter macaroon with one T and two O's. And use the hashtag GBC Ghost Next Door so that we can check it and see any responses.
Right. Yeah, I look forward to it.
And speaking of your blog, that's a brand new thing you didn't have before when we were filming. Why don't you tell people about it?
Oh, okay. So I've been on the fence about creating a blog for some time now. I did a look through my email for some content that I was looking for, and I have an email there from 2014 from my husband sending me blog information. But recently, probably earlier this spring, I was reading a lot of articles, and I just needed the final kick to kind of go and do it. My coworkers who are in town and don't get out of town very often are always asking where I'm going and what I'm doing on the weekends. So I'm blogging about what I'm doing and where I'm going on the weekends.
Yeah, and you do lots of fun stuff. Like you go to abandoned places sometimes and you go geocaching.
We do. We found a lot of places geocaching. Like the abandoned places, waterfalls, swimming holes. We also find like old gun containers, like ammo containers filled with little treats, and you bring something and you trade. And we do a lot of festivals and going for drives and play board games and just... It's a random blog.
It's everything, Jen.
And you will find Goosebumps there too.
Yes.
So I do promote our videos on my blog around the time. It's usually a day after so that they come out. So I'm trying to bring in more people to settle our debates and talk Goosebumps with us.
Alright, and on that note, next week we are starting book number 3 Monster Blood. And this one is definitely going to be a good one.
Yes.
I think we actually both remember this one, don't we?
We
From
do.
when we were kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember all the details, obviously. It's, like, all kind of foggy.
Yeah, but it's
one I remembered, like, I really remembered reading. More so than Stay Out of the Basement.
Yeah. It's got, like, this nostalgia feel, I think. Just reading the synopsis on the back, I was like, yeah, I do. I kind of remember that. But I'll be anxious now to see if I remember the ending, because I'm pretty sure I don't.
And we're going to do something a little different. We're going to stick with going through this series. So the book after Monster Blood is going to be Monster Blood 2. So be ready for that. And until next time, reader beware.
You're in for a scare. Good nap. She's like looking at you like a pirate.
She's like the cat from The Last Unicorn.
Yep.
Arr. A good cat. Never gave a straight answer.
Why won't you help me? Why must you always speak in riddles? Because I be what I be. I would tell you what you want to know if I could, Mum, but I be a cat, and no cat anywhere ever gave anyone a straight answer.